You ever return home from a Black Ops mission in the Alps, only to find your front door's been changed, locked, and labeled with a neon orange sticker that reads, "Access revoked by HOA Security Authority"? No? Just me? Cool. Because nothing screams "welcome home" like realizing the woman who once fined me for having overly confident landscaping just tried to evict a CIA lockpicking instructor from his own house. And what did I do? I bent down, picked up a twig and a hairpin from my shoe tread, and opened that lock faster than she could say, "property violation." Her jaw hit the pavement. Mine just smiled. So, let me take you back a few hours before that glorious moment of stunned Karen silence. I had just returned from 2 weeks of freezing my bones off in a freezing cold, off-the-books CIA mission in Switzerland, something about intercepting a courier, a flash drive, and 3 kilos of uncooked pasta used as a cipher delivery method. Don't ask. The point is, I hadn't slept in 42 hours, still had a thermal patch on my neck, and my duffel bag smelled like jet fuel and regret. All I wanted was a hot shower, a strong coffee, and to fall asleep in my own bed for 12 hours. But when I pulled into my driveway, something felt off. First of all, the landscaping looked untouched, which was strange because I pay good money for my yard to look like it's part of an elite botanical garden. Second, there was no mail in the box, no newspaper on the step, and my usual welcome mat, an ironic comeback with a warrant, was missing. Instead, it had been replaced by one that said, "Compliance starts at the door," which already screamed HOA. But the real shock hit me when my key didn't fit. Not the front door, not the back, not even the garage panel. At first I thought I was just too sleep-deprived to function like a human. I even tried turning the key upside down because, hey, maybe I was just jet-lagged. But then I saw it, bright orange, peeling slightly at the edges. This property has been temporarily seized under Article 12C of Community Code Conduct. Contact HOA Authority for access. My brain went from sleepy to SWAT mode in 2 seconds. Now for context. Yes, I own the house. I paid cash. Yes, I live in an HOA neighborhood. And no, I've never liked them. Karen, the woman who leads the HOA board like she's Caesar reincarnated, is the type of person who carries a ruler to measure grass length. Last year she fined my neighbor $300 because his American flag clashed with seasonal decor. But changing my locks while I was out of town? That was next-level dictatorship. I pulled out my phone and tried calling the HOA hotline number listed. Voicemail. Of course. So I walked over to the HOA office, which was a 5-minute stroll down the same path she had once said was too aggressively curved for a walking trail. And there she was, Karen, sitting behind a glass desk with a fake gold nameplate that read, HOA Regional Compliance Coordinator, sipping from a mug that said, "I'm not bossy, I'm authoritative." The moment she saw me, she didn't even flinch. Just smirked like I was the guest at a party she hadn't invited. "Oh," she said, in that nasal tone that made every sentence sound like a whine complaint. "Back already? Already? Already from what?" She continued without missing a beat. "We noticed you were gone for quite some time, and neighbors expressed concerns. Odd cars. Unusual hours. Lots of coming and going. There was a vote. You were deemed security risk adjacent." I blinked. Security risk adjacent? Yes. And we had reason to believe your house was unoccupied and potentially being used for other purposes. You've officially violated Articles 3B, 5D, and 11. "Are those actual rules?" I asked. "They are now." And that's when I realized she'd done it. She'd used my absence as an excuse to break into my home, change my locks, and start a paper trail of made-up violations to back it all up. She handed me a laminated sheet of infractions, including grass texture inconsistent with neighborhood aesthetic, excessive garage security, lack of visible seasonal cheer, suspiciously timed garbage disposal. The kicker? She handed me a temporary visitor pass to access my own house with an expiration date of 72 hours. I didn't even answer. I just turned around and walked out, past the fake marble floors, the HOA bulletin board warning people not to use purple mulch, and back down the trail. When I got to my door again, I stared at the new lock. It was a high-end smart deadbolt, probably paid for with HOA funds, and installed by someone with no idea what they were doing. Child's play. I crouched down, flicked a piece of bark from my boot, and bent a discarded hairpin I always kept in the sole for emergencies. 15 seconds later, the door clicked. I walked in, dropped my bag, and immediately heard the sound of Karen shrieking from across the lawn. "You can't do that," she shouted. "You're violating the override order." I leaned back out and called to her. "Karen, I teach lock bypassing at Langley. You may want to update your security guidelines." Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. Nothing came out. I didn't even wait for her to reboot. I shut the door, turned on the coffee machine, and checked for bugs in my vent. Because if she went this far over some HOA nonsense, I had to wonder, was this really just about power? Or was there something else going on? Turns out, Karen wasn't just drunk on control. She was part of something much bigger. And I was about to find out just how deep her claws went into this little suburban kingdom. The day after I reclaimed my house with nothing but a twig and a hairpin, I decided it was time to start asking the real questions. Because something about the whole situation smelled off, and it wasn't just the 3-week-old chili in my fridge. Karen changing the locks while I was gone was one thing, but the deeper issue wasn't about unauthorized entry. It was about why she thought she could do it, and who gave her the confidence to act like she was head of Homeland Security for a retirement neighborhood. HOA Karens don't usually have this much audacity without backup. That meant either she had dirt on someone or someone with actual power was backing her play. So I started small. I did what I always do when I need to uncover a secret op, I walked the dog. Which is funny, because I don't have a dog. But in a neighborhood like this, nothing gets you access to private conversations and judgmental glares like pretending to walk a golden retriever named Biscuit while holding a leash tied to thin air. People assume you belong. They wave, they talk, they slip up. And sure enough, by the time I rounded block 3, I overheard an older couple whispering about that guy who lives in the corner house with blackout curtains and military-looking locks. That guy was me. I kept walking and noticed something weird. A white pest control van was parked across the street from my property. Harmless, right? Except I've seen actual pest control outfits, and they don't usually have 5 antennas sticking out the top or thermal imaging stickers still on the side panel. I slowed down, pretended Biscuit was investigating a bush, and caught a glimpse of a guy inside wearing what looked like a comm headset. When he noticed me noticing him, he turned the ignition without hesitation and rolled off. No logo, no phone number on the van, just a barcode that didn't scan when I checked it later. That wasn't pest control. That was surveillance. Things escalated later that night. I fired up one of my handheld signal detectors. Just routine, like checking your smoke alarms but for spies, and sure enough, there was a low-frequency pulse coming from 2 houses down. Not regular Wi-Fi. Something military-grade. I triangulated the signal to a decorative birdhouse sitting on top of a flagpole in Karen's front yard. Nobody wires a Finch condo with a directional antenna unless they're trying to monitor something, or someone. Probably me. So I called in a favor. My neighbor Lou, a former Navy cryptanalyst turned semi-retired hacker, owed me one from years ago when I helped him out of a sticky situation involving offshore servers and a bottle of rum. Lou lives in a house that looks like it's falling apart but has better cybersecurity than most banks. I explained what I was seeing, and he was intrigued immediately. He grabbed a few portable scanners, a thermal lens, and his absolutely not legal network sniffer, and we went out for a little midnight recon mission around the HOA office. The building was quiet, of course. Karen had gone home, or into her lair, depending on your perspective, but the place was locked up tight. The back door had a magnetic security latch, the kind used in corporate office parks, not suburban community rooms. I asked Lou how long he needed. He asked me if I had a credit card I didn't care about. I handed him my expired Blockbuster membership card for style points. 20 seconds later, we were in. The moment we stepped into the office, things got weird. For one, it smelled like air freshener and paranoia. Second, the walls were covered with laminated HOA rule sheets that looked like they had been updated weekly. But the real jackpot was the locked room in the back marked HOA compliance storage, staff only. You know you're in trouble when an HOA needs a restricted data room. Lou cracked the keypad using a signal decoder, and we stepped inside to find what looked like a mini NSA setup. Racks of servers, monitors with security feeds from multiple homes, USB sticks labeled by street names. There were even folders printed out with surveillance logs on residents, like timestamps of when people left for work, when they received packages, even what kind of cereal they bought based on trash reports. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just Karen being nosy. Someone had turned this HOA into a residential surveillance hub. And not a very well-hidden one either. One file had my name on it. My full name. Not the one I use publicly, but my agency clearance name. That's not something Karen would have had access to, not unless she was connected to someone who already knew who I was. I flipped open the folder. It was thin, but precise. A few images of me leaving my home in disguise. GPS timestamp. License plates. This wasn't HOA level. This was federal or private contractor level. Someone was using Karen's obsession with control to run a real-world data mine through a clueless suburban shell. Then came the real kicker. On the desk was a tablet with a recently closed message window. Lou worked his magic and recovered the deleted log. It was a chat window with a pseudonym handle, Sable Eagle. The last message read, "Target still unaware. Local puppet compliant. Proceeding as scheduled. Interference will be neutralized if necessary." Puppet. That's what Karen was. A pawn. Probably flattered into helping. Probably offered some fake title, maybe a little compensation. But she had no idea the people she was helping were already planning to discard her. That's when I realized the stakes were far bigger than angry neighborhood meetings and ridiculous fines. Someone was hunting intelligence agents in safe zone communities using HOA networks as cover, and Karen had signed the dotted line without even knowing what she was endorsing. Before we left, I downloaded the entire server onto an encrypted flash drive and erased every log that mentioned my name. I couldn't take the physical files, not yet. That would blow cover. But I knew this was just the beginning. Whatever was happening here, whoever was behind this operation, they didn't expect anyone to notice, let alone someone who could trace it back, decode it, and fight back. On the way out, Lou looked at me and said what we were both thinking. "Dude, this ain't just Karen. This is a network." He was right. Karen was just the flapping flag on the front lawn. But there was a storm behind her, and it had access to all our homes. I locked my door manually that night, no smart system, no Bluetooth. Just metal and key. As I sat by the window with a cup of black coffee and my old field pistol on the table, I knew the next move was mine. And I was done playing nice. The next morning, I wasn't sipping coffee. I was reviewing the list of every single surveillance device Lou and I had traced in a 10-block radius. 32. That's how many covert systems were operating under the radar of the neighborhood. Birdhouses, sprinkler controllers, smart doorbells that weren't even connected to homes, motion detectors disguised as yard lights, all routed through Karen's so-called compliance server. The level of detail and coordination told me one thing. Whoever was behind this wasn't just targeting me. They were watching everyone. And Karen was either too naive to see it or too arrogant to care. Either way, it was time to flip the script. I didn't go full scorched earth. Not yet. That comes later. First, I did what every seasoned field operative does when he wants to trigger an overconfident amateur into showing their hand. I played dumb. I showed up to the next HOA community cookout wearing a Hawaiian shirt, aviators, and a goofy smile. I brought store-bought potato salad and told everyone I'd been off-grid in Montana writing a novel about tree spirits. The absurdity of that alone made Karen visibly twitch. I wanted to see what she'd do when she thought I was back to normal, clueless, unaware of what I'd found in that office. Karen couldn't help herself. She showed up 20 minutes in with a clipboard and a manufactured smile so tight it looked stapled to her face. She made a big show of welcoming me back, complimenting my charming lawn ornaments, and handed me a printed letter about a new community security initiative that included voluntary in-home compliance checks. In-home compliance checks. That wasn't even subtle anymore. Of course, I acted impressed. I told her it sounded very professional. I asked if she came up with it herself or if it was part of a broader program. She looked pleased for half a second, then mentioned something about a consulting group that had helped the HOA upgrade its oversight method. I asked her the name. She hesitated, then said it was confidential for security reasons. That's when I knew she had no idea who she was really working with, and that meant I could exploit her without tipping off the bigger fish just yet. I spent the next 3 days executing what I called Operation Suburban Showdown. The goal was simple: disrupt the network, expose the fake HOA upgrades, and force Karen to panic in public, ideally on camera. I started with the cameras. Using a custom signal scrambler Lou lent me, I walked past each surveillance point broadcasting a looped image of empty street. They'd be looking at fake footage, not knowing the real feed was down. Then I reprogrammed Karen's prized HOA drone to follow her car like an overenthusiastic puppy. On day 2, I accidentally triggered every smart sprinkler on the block during the HOA's weekly yard inspection. Karen slipped on wet pavement and landed in a patch of gnome figurines. Someone got it on video. It hit TikTok by dinner. But the grand finale came on Saturday. I invited every resident to a fully HOA-compliant backyard barbecue. Permits filed. Decibel levels within range. All decorations approved. But just as everyone was settling in with ribs and lemonade, I made a show of thanking Karen for her dedication to community safety. Then I pulled out a projector screen and said, "Let's review our neighborhood's proud surveillance upgrades." The footage I played was a sanitized version of what Lou and I found: clips of the devices, timestamps from innocent homes, and a graph showing unusual data exports to servers registered overseas. I never mentioned the CIA. I just let the crowd do the math. Karen tried to cut the power to my house halfway through the video. What she didn't know was that I'd rerouted all electrical systems through a backup generator with an old-school circuit breaker. She flipped the main switch at the breaker box and nothing happened. People laughed. Someone offered her a hot dog. She screamed something about traitors and stormed off. 10 minutes later, a neighbor posted the entire event on Reddit under the title, "HOA Karen tries to cancel barbecue, gets burned instead." Views spiked within hours. But here's the part one didn't expect. Later that night, as I sat reviewing new signal logs from my router, I noticed an active connection request trying to breach my secure VPN. I traced the IP. It didn't route through local servers anymore. It had bounced off a satellite uplink. Whoever was watching me knew I was poking around. They'd stepped up their game. That confirmed it. This was no longer an HOA problem. This was a private network with corporate resources, possibly black market contractors or a rogue intelligence firm. Either way, Karen was just the ugly face of a much scarier mask. I drove to Lou's place, the kind of bunker you'd expect a doomsday prepper to run but with better Wi-Fi. We reviewed the footage and the new data traces. One sequence caught both our eyes. A van parked 3 houses down from mine had shown up at exact 12-hour intervals, always for 43 minutes, then gone. No branding, no plates, no traceable pattern except the perfect consistency. It wasn't surveillance. It was extraction. Something, or someone, was being pulled from that house. Lou ran a thermal filter on the most recent footage. It showed two men carrying a hard case and a disguised antenna array. Standard tactical gear. Non-standard behavior. The residents of that home? A retired postal worker and her cat. Unless the cat was transmitting nuclear codes, someone had installed a listening post in their attic. It didn't end there. Lou dug deeper and found a shared metadata tag across multiple devices in the network, Sable Eagle. The same codename from the tablet message we uncovered earlier. We traced it to a series of data dumps hosted on a secure drop site used by international private contractors. One file had photos of me, Lou, and 3 other residents, people I hadn't even spoken to but who all had federal employment histories. This HOA wasn't just a neighborhood. It had become a surveillance web targeting former and current intelligence personnel under the guise of Karen's Community Compliance Initiative. The most damning photo was one of me taken inside my home the night before I returned from Switzerland. That meant someone had entered before the locks were changed. The lockout wasn't a punishment. It was a cover. They'd gone in, planted bugs, accessed my safe. Thankfully I store nothing sensitive in the obvious one, and used Karen as their excuse. I could feel the pressure building. I'd poked the bear, and the bear had teeth. But what they didn't realize was this. I had claws too. And I wasn't afraid to use them. Because I just baited the trap, and someone was about to walk right into it. The next 72 hours were all about precision. No more poking, no more passive disruption. Now it was time for the real operation. I didn't just want to expose the network anymore. I wanted to bring it down piece by piece, brick by brick, and I wanted Karen to see every bit of it crumble in front of her. The trick with a sting like this isn't in the tech or the gear. It's in the timing. I needed Karen to act predictably irrational, which, to be fair, wasn't much of a stretch for her. And I needed the people behind her to think they were still one step ahead, when in fact they were walking right into my net. I started by putting bait on my porch. Not literal cheese on a mousetrap, though that would have been on brand for the neighborhood, but something a little more psychologically irresistible. A hard black case, military grade, placed right next to my front door with a bold yellow sticker across the top that read, Classified Asset Disposal, Authorized Eyes Only. The kind of thing that made any self-important person foam at the mouth. I added just enough scuffs and travel tags to make it look like it had been couriered from a federal warehouse. The kind of box that screamed, steal me if you want to ruin your life. I placed a micro camera in the bird feeder across the street, rerouted my security feed through 3 VPN tunnels, and made sure every bit of footage would stream to multiple secure servers, including one ready for immediate broadcast upload. And then I left. Not too far, just around the corner, with a hot coffee and a rented van that looked like it came off a plumbing lot. From my vantage point, I could see everything. I waited, counting the seconds like a chess clock. It didn't even take 2 hours. Karen strutted up my driveway like a mall cop with a warrant. She glanced around with all the subtlety of a cartoon villain, bent over the box, tapped it once with her pen, and then, just like that, she pulled out a pair of gloves from her handbag and started opening the latches. I almost felt bad for her. Almost. The moment she unlatched the second clip, the motion sensor in the box triggered a silent alert. Every system lit up on my side. She had taken the bait. Inside the box was nothing dangerous, but it was absolutely damning. Paperwork, doctored but official-looking, referencing encrypted communications between community coordinators and foreign consultant. A fake map of planted surveillance nodes across the neighborhood. And best of all, a fabricated order authorizing Karen to oversee data collection on behalf of a private intelligence contractor, dated 2 weeks before she changed my lock. It looked legitimate enough to terrify her. Which was the point. Karen stuffed the entire packet into her purse and marched straight back to the HOA office. That was where Phase 2 began. I'd already triggered the internal camera I found earlier in the server room and set it to begin recording again once she entered. Within 5 minutes, I had her on video rifling through documents, dialing a number, and screaming into a phone like a cat that had been tossed into a blender. Then something unexpected happened. A man showed up. Not a resident. Not HOA. Someone in a dark suit, too clean for fieldwork but too stiff for corporate. I recognized him immediately. His name was Bishop. Former CIA, burned for selling intel to a third-party analytics firm. He vanished 5 years ago after a botched mission in Warsaw. And now here he was, standing in a strip mall HOA office like it was his operations command center. Karen handed him the documents, and he didn't even blink. Just took them, shredded them, and looked her dead in the eye. Then he said something I couldn't hear but could read just fine on the camera. If you talk, you vanish. That was it. Karen's face dropped. Her whole body language changed. She wasn't running the show anymore. She never had been. She was just useful until she wasn't. Now she was afraid. It was in that moment I realized she might not even have made these choices out of malice but out of ignorance and manipulation. Not that it changed what she'd done. But it made the endgame clearer. Later that night, I activated the final part of the plan. I emailed 3 secure files. One to a local news outlet with a history of whistleblower support, one to an independent investigative journalist who'd already gone viral once exposing shady HOA extortion schemes, and one to a federal contact who owed me a favor from the Belarus incident. Alongside the footage, I included network maps, screenshots, and video of Bishop taking the bait. Within hours, the pieces were moving. But I wasn't done yet. The next morning, I held a community seminar at the clubhouse under the guise of a basic lockpicking demo. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. I titled it, How to Protect What's Yours, and told the attendees it was about personal security. About 15 people showed up. More than I expected. Some curious, some confused, and a few, I suspected, sent by the network to keep tabs on me. I didn't care. I welcomed them with coffee, pastries, and a whiteboard titled, How I Got Back into My Own House in 12 Seconds. People laughed, took notes, asked questions. And while I taught the difference between pin tumbler and wafer locks, I slipped in metaphors. About not letting strangers change your access. About knowing the difference between rules and control. And about how sometimes the most dangerous thing in a neighborhood wasn't the stranger in a hoodie, it was the person with a clipboard and a smile. Halfway through, Karen walked in. Alone. Pale. She sat in the back and said nothing. When I finished, I thanked everyone and reminded them to always question authority, even when it wears pastels and sensible shoes. I looked directly at her. She didn't say a word. Just stared down at her hands. By that evening, the news story had broken. Headlines splashed across local feeds. HOA surveillance network uncovered, former CIA agent involved in suburban spy ring, and neighborhood watch or watchdog state? Karen's name wasn't in the first wave, but that didn't stop her from completely vanishing from the HOA office. Word spread fast. Residents started removing the birdhouse cameras. A petition formed overnight to dissolve the current board. At least 3 people admitted they'd been fined or harassed based on false security claims. The HOA's lawyer issued a generic statement about ongoing internal reviews. And the cherry on top? Bishop's image had already been sent to multiple agencies. By sunrise, he was on a no-fly list. Karen's house sat dark for the next 2 nights. Then one morning, she was gone. Moving truck. No wave goodbye. No explanation. Just silence. That's when I knew, checkmate. Peace in a neighborhood is a strange thing. You never notice when it's there, but you feel every crack when it disappears. For weeks, the street had felt like a slow-burning war zone dressed up in HOA-friendly colors, where smiles hid threats and lawn gnomes concealed surveillance cameras. But now, after the fallout, the silence was different. Not tense. Not waiting. Just still. Karen was gone. The network had been burned. And the neighborhood finally breathed again, like it had been holding its lungs hostage under fake flower beds and fluorescent code violations. And for the first time since I moved in, I could finally sit on my porch, sip coffee, and not wonder which artificial squirrel in a tree was listening in. It started with small things. Neighbors who had avoided each other started talking again. A father and son team repainted their mailbox without getting a warning. A woman down the street planted a neon blue flamingo garden, and not a single complaint showed up on her door. It was as if everyone collectively decided they were done living under Karen's shadow. Her name, once spoken with dread or nervous laughter, became a cautionary tale. People called it the lockout scandal. Some called it Spygate HOA. And one guy, bless him, started selling shirts that read, "Unlock Your Rights," with a picture of a crowbar over a picket fence. I bought 3. The HOA board, now thoroughly disbanded and publicly disgraced, held one final emergency meeting in a borrowed church basement. Only 2 members showed up. The rest had either resigned or were named in pending lawsuits thanks to the documents I leaked. Turns out the illegal fines, fraudulent surveillance grants, and misuse of homeowner dues had finally caught up with them. The neighborhood voted to eliminate the HOA entirely, replacing it with a simple, volunteer-run resident council. No fees, no fines, no Karen. It was poetic. But what really sealed it all was the seminar. A week after the story broke, the local library asked if I'd do a public session on basic home security. I agreed. But this time, it wasn't just about locks or bypasses. I made it personal. I told them how easy it is to confuse control with protection, how real security comes from transparency, and how dangerous it is to let someone in a cardigan dictate your right to privacy. I never mentioned the CIA. I didn't need to. People got the message. Afterward, a teenager came up and asked if I thought his smart camera could be hacked. I said yes. He nodded, went home, and apparently replaced it with a carved wooden owl. I called it progress. As for Karen, the last confirmed sighting was 2 towns over, arguing with a bagel shop owner about the acceptable density of poppy seeds. She's out there somewhere, probably trying to enforce bylaws in a neighborhood that didn't ask for them. But she won't be back here. She knows better. Her face made the news. Her voice made the recordings. And her story became a Reddit legend. Someone even animated the barbecue footage and turned it into a short cartoon called Karen vs. the Lock Whisperer. Over 3 million views in 2 days. Internet justice has a certain flavor that traditional justice just can't match. I didn't exactly go back to normal, though. You don't dismantle a covert surveillance ring masquerading as a homeowner association and expect to just mow your lawn in peace. There were follow-up calls from people in suit. Polite but pointed. Curious about how I'd uncovered so much so quickly. I told them the truth. I was provoked. That when someone picks a fight on your doorstep, you don't run, you return the favor. Especially when that doorstep belongs to you. Most of them respected that. A few were worried about what else I knew. I let them keep wondering. One surprise came in the form of a letter. Handwritten, sealed in old-school wax, no return address. Inside was a simple thank you. No name. No signature. Just, you weren't the only one they were watching. You reminded us to watch back. I burned the letter after reading it, but the message stuck. Whatever web had been spun around this neighborhood, I wasn't the only one who had felt the threads tighten. I'd just been the first to cut them loose. Eventually, I did a full sweep of my home. Found 3 bugs I hadn't discovered before, including one buried inside a light switch and another tucked behind my fridge compressor. Both had been disabled already, probably once the story went public. But it confirmed my instincts were right all along. Karen didn't install those. She just opened the door. The real players were higher, quieter, and better funded. But they made one mistake. They underestimated what someone with time, skills, and a very personal grudge could do in their own backyard. Now, the house has new locks. Real ones. Biometric, layered, offline. No more cloud storage, no remote access. If you're not me, you're not getting in. And even if you are me, you'd better remember which thumb you use to register. I added some fun quirks too. A decoy safe full of Monopoly money. A smart assistant that randomly speaks Russian proverbs to spook intruders. And of course, a front door mat that now reads, "Try me." The final twist? Karen's old house didn't stay empty for long. A few weeks after everything died down, I saw a moving truck and a woman unloading crates marked, "Governor Training Equipment, Clearance Verified." She wasn't alone. A man with a familiar walk helped her carry in a weighted box. Turns out, she was one of my former trainees from Langley, fresh off an internal rotation and looking for a low-profile place to settle. She smiled when she saw me. Said she heard the neighborhood was quiet now. I just laughed. Quiet, sure. For now. I helped them move in, shared a few tips, and told them about the HOA that was. Her husband chuckled and asked if Karen had really tried to evict a CIA instructor by changing the locks. I nodded. He just shook his head and said, "Bold move." I agreed. Bold and colossally stupid. That night, as I sat back on my porch, a breeze carrying the scent of grilled steaks and blooming jasmine, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Control. Not over other people. Not through power or surveillance. But over my own life, my own space, and my own peace. The kind of control that no HOA board, no fake spy network, and certainly no clipboard-wielding Karen could take from me again. Then, just for fun, I pulled up the live feed from the camera I'd hidden in the old HOA server room before I cleared it out. Just in case. The room was empty now, echoing with dust and silence. But if anything ever stirred in there again, I'd know. Because around here, locks aren't what keep things safe. People do. And this time, the right people are watching.